President George H.W. Bush ordered the removal of nuclear-tipped cruise missiles from American ships and submarines when the Cold War ended more than 30 years ago. Both major political parties in the United States were still realistic about the risks of growing nuclear arsenals. Bush's action was a wise one for maintaining nuclear stability. In 2013, President Barack Obama fully phased out nuclear cruise missiles. Recently, as House and Senate conferees began to iron out differences between the two chambers on a nearly $900 billion Pentagon spending bill for the next fiscal year, both the House and Senate Armed Services Committees want to place a new generation of nuclear-armed sea-launched cruise missiles, known as SLCM-N, back on Navy ships. A section of U.S. congressmen are voting for reintroducing a costly and redundant nuclear program. Republican lawmakers in the House are adopting a measure to institutionalize the Sea-Launched Cruise Missile Nuclear, or SLCM-N. The SLCM was denied funding in last year's fiscal year 2023 budget and concluded to have no battlefield use in the 2022 Nuclear Posture Review, or NPR. The Cold War-era concept envisages a cruise missile with a low-yield tactical nuclear warhead that can be fired from submarines, warships, or naval aircraft on a trajectory that makes it hard to track by radar. According to a report in Defense News, the House Armed Services Committee voted along party lines to amend the fiscal 2024 National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, with a provision that would create a program of record, or POR, for SLCM-N. A POR is a listed line-item record in current and future defense acquisition plans, making them eligible for continued funding. If the full HASC advances fiscal year 2024, or FY24, and passes the entire floor vote in July, it would receive nearly $196 million as research and development funds. However, political leaders and military experts advise against the astronomical costs and futile capability, which they say can be invested elsewhere and performed by other weapons systems. Representative Courtney, a Democratic congressman from Connecticut who chairs the Sea Power Subcommittee, cited May testimony from Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Michael Gilday, stating that the warheads needed to make an SLCM-N program would cost at least $31 billion. The Navy can do a lot of other things with $31 billion. You can build 15 DDG destroyers with $31 billion, 10 Virginia-class submarines with $31 billion. You put nuclear warheads on those vessels, then you are changing the mission, Courtney said. Another Democratic congressman, Representative Adam Smith of Washington, the top Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, argued that the U.S. already has ballistic submarines and lower-yield nuclear options from the air. It's like walking us down a path of spending enormous money on a capability that we don't really need that will undermine our ability to build capabilities that we do need going forward, said Smith. Citing the need for flexibility and regional presence, the Trump administration's 2018 Nuclear Posture Review, or NPR, called for re-establishing a sea-launched cruise missile nuclear capability. President Biden's FY 2022 budget continued funding SLCM-N, aiming to deploy it by the late 2020s. However, with the 2022 NPR identifying SLCM-N as no longer necessary, Biden's 2023 budget request did not include SLCM-N funding. The missile saddles necessary weapons platforms like submarines and warships with a mission set that U.S. Air Force strategic bombers can undertake. It takes away the flexibility of employing diverse firepower options with various platforms. Should a geographic combatant commander intend to seek permission to use a nuclear weapon for tactical purposes, selecting bombers would offer more flexibility between mission sets and avoid committing to a weapons loadout decision as far in advance as would be necessary if SLCM were chosen, retired U.S. Navy officer Captain John Moulton writes in a paper. In other words, an SLCM-N armed naval submarine or warship meets a very narrow mission set of destroying hardened enemy ground targets while sacrificing equally important tactical and strategic roles like hunting enemy submarines, destroying surface warships, laying mines, or providing intelligence surveillance reconnaissance, or ISR. Other currently nuclear weapons-capable platforms like the B-2 Spirit, B-52 Stratofortress, B-1B Lancer, and the upcoming B-21 Raider envisaged for the same mission could also reach the war zone quickly. Moulton further explains that the cost of revealing its position while firing an SLCM-N would also far outweigh the gains from hitting enemy ground targets with low-yield nuclear missiles. Moulton is a senior fellow at the Council on Strategic Risks' Yanni E. Nolan Center on Strategic Weapons. The conditions that justify using a tactical nuclear-tipped cruise missile would be rare and prevent a submarine or naval vessel from performing optimally on a fluid battlefield. In the Western Pacific, becoming part of a joint force is a mutually supporting pushback against a People's Liberation Army Navy, or PLAN, fleet inside China's dangerous anti-access area denial, or A2AD zone, is a new evolving orientation guiding the U.S. Navy's submarine arm, as explained in a previous Eurasian Times analysis. Lastly, the risks of unintended nuclear escalation are exponentially higher when an SLCM-N is fired, since the country sustaining the attack, China or North Korea, might legitimately retaliate with a nuclear strike, triggering a devastating atomic exchange. Experts have long pointed out how such exchanges cannot be controlled given the tensions and miscalculations involved. A U.S. asset firing an SLCM-N also counts as a nuclear-first strike, which shifts the diplomatic narrative in the Russian, Chinese, or North Korean favor. None of these countries has ever indicated they plan to use nuclear weapons as a warfighting tool. While China has a clear no-first-use or NFU policy, Moscow and Pyongyang have maintained they will use nukes only when the physical security of their countries faces an existential threat.